to IA English Podcast number 2, the show where we learn English in a fun and engaging way. I'm your host, Sara, and today I have the great pleasure of introducing someone truly special. He's a native English teacher from the UK who has been teaching English for over 12 years around the world. His name is James. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you so much, Sara. I'm really happy to be here. It's always a pleasure to share my experiences, especially with people who are passionate about learning English. So yes, I'm originally from Brighton, a lovely seaside town in the south of England. I started teaching English right after university. At first, it was just a way to travel and see the world, but it quickly became something much deeper, a passion, really. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to teach in so many fascinating places. I spent 3 years in Spain, 1 year in Brazil, and 2 years in Colombia, which, by the way, has some of the friendliest students I've ever taught. I've also taught in Japan, Egypt, and I even led a group of students on an educational trip to Kenya, which I'll talk more about later. One of the most rewarding things about teaching English is not just helping students learn the language, but watching how it transforms their lives. I've had students go from being shy and quiet to giving presentations in front of hundreds of people. It's powerful. Great question. I always tell my students that learning English, or any language, is not just about memorizing vocabulary or passing grammar tests. It's about creating a lifestyle around the language. One thing that really helps is consistency. Even 15 to 20 minutes a day can do wonders if you're consistent. It's better than studying for 3 hours once a week and then forgetting everything. Also, immersion is key. And no, you don't need to move to London or New York to immerse yourself. You can create an English environment right where you are. Change your phone to English, listen to English podcasts or music, watch your favorite series in English with subtitles. Try to think in English during your day. For example, if you're walking to the store, ask yourself in English, what do I need to buy? How much does it cost? Another powerful tool is shadowing, where you repeat what a native speaker says in real time. It improves pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence. Finally, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Some of the best learning happens when we get something wrong and then correct it.
I love that, especially the part about not being afraid of mistakes. Now, you mentioned earlier that you led a group of students on a trip to Kenya. That sounds like an adventure. Can you share more about that? What did you like the most? Any impressions?
Absolutely. That trip was one of the most memorable experiences of my life. I was working with an international language school, and we organized a special cultural immersion program in Kenya for advanced English students from different countries, Germany, Brazil, Mexico, and Thailand, to name a few. We spent 3 weeks there, combining classroom lessons with community projects. In the mornings, we had English workshops focused on storytelling, public speaking, and environmental vocabulary. In the afternoons, we worked with local schools, helped clean up public areas, and even created a video documentary, in English, about sustainability in Kenya. What was amazing was how much English the students used naturally. They were speaking English not just because they had to, but because it was the only way to communicate with each other, and with the local guides. There were also some funny moments. One of my Brazilian students kept calling lions big cats with crazy hair, and the phrase became our unofficial motto for the trip.
That's brilliant. I can imagine the group laughing a lot. And what about your time in Latin America? You said you taught in Colombia and Brazil. Many people travel to these countries, but what did you like the most? The people, their food, their music, their cities, their nature?
Oh, Latin America has a very special place in my heart. The culture, the music, the food, the energy, everything is so vibrant and warm. I spent 1 year teaching in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and then moved to Medellin, Colombia, for 2 more years. In both places, I saw something incredible, a real hunger to learn. Many of my students were professionals who wanted to work abroad, or young people dreaming of studying in the US or Europe. One thing that stood out was how communal the learning felt. Students would often come to class together, study in cafes, or practice English during dance lessons or while cooking traditional food. I once had a lesson entirely in a kitchen while making apá. That was delicious and educational. Also, the challenges are different. In Brazil, many students struggle with pronunciation, especially with the th sound. In Colombia, it's often verb tenses. But no matter the country, I always tell students, you already speak a beautiful language, now let's add one more.
Great, and did you learn any Spanish or Portuguese on your trip to these countries? For example, I know several words in Spanish, but there's one in particular called pendejao, and when I say it, my students from Latin America laugh.
Oh dear, you've just unlocked a core memory. Smiling face with open mouth and smiling eyes. Yes, I picked up some Spanish, mostly polite phrases like ¿Dónde está el bien? Or ¿Qué amable? But I also learned, the hard way, about words like pendejao. One day in Mexico, I innocently repeated it after hearing it in a TV show, and my friends nearly spat out their drinks laughing. Turns out, my textbook Spanish and street Spanish had a cultural gap the size of the Grand Canyon. So now I warn my students, if you're learning slang abroad, always ask a local es grosero. Is this rude? First. Otherwise, you might accidentally call your teacher a pendejao instead of a professor. Laughs, then shifts to teaching mode. But seriously, this is why context matters in language learning, whether it's English or Spanish. Stick with Haramaigu or Gineol to stay safe.
I'm loving these stories, James. And I'm sure our listeners are feeling really inspired right now. You've traveled so much, worked with so many cultures. What are some cultural differences you've noticed when it comes to how people learn English?
That's a fascinating topic, and one I could talk about for hours. Every culture has its own relationship with learning, and with making mistakes. For example, in Japan, I found that students were extremely disciplined and respectful. They studied hard, but many of them were very shy when it came to speaking out loud. They were so afraid of making mistakes that it actually slowed their progress. On the other hand, in Brazil or Colombia, students were much more expressive, more willing to try, laugh, and talk, even if their grammar wasn't perfect. And ironically, those students often improved faster in conversation skills, simply because they weren't afraid of trying. In Europe, I noticed that many learners were exposed to English from a young age through music, films, or video games. So even if they didn't study it much, they developed a kind of ear for the language. That gave them a head start in pronunciation and listening. The biggest lesson here is, your attitude matters more than your environment. Wherever you are, if you're curious, brave, and consistent, you will learn.
That's such a good point. Sometimes we blame our environment like, oh, I live in a Spanish-speaking country, so I can't learn English. But it's really about your mindset. Now let's bust some myths. What are some common misconceptions that students have about learning English?
Oh, I love this part. There are so many myths out there. Let me give you a few of the most common ones. 1. I'm too old to learn. Total myth. I've taught people in their 60s and 70s who learned English beautifully. Adults have discipline and motivation that kids often don't. 2. I need to study grammar first. Grammar is important, yes, but speaking and listening should come first. Babies don't learn grammar rules before speaking, right? 3. I need to sound like a native speaker. Not true. You don't need a British or American accent to speak well. Clarity is more important than sounding like someone else. 4. If I watch movies in English, I'll automatically learn. Watching helps, but only if you do it actively. That means pausing, repeating, writing down new words, turning passive watching into a learning session. 5. I have to be perfect. No, no, and no. Fluency is about communication, not perfection. You can make mistakes and still be an amazing speaker.
Those are amazing, James. I think a lot of people listening right now just felt a huge weight off their shoulders. And now I want to ask you something more personal. After all these years teaching English, what has being a teacher taught you?
Wow, what a powerful question, Sara. Teaching English has taught me more about humanity than any book ever could. It's taught me patience, compassion, and how much potential every single person has, no matter where they come from. I've sat with Syrian refugees learning English to start a new life. I've taught young mothers in Colombia who studied at night after putting their children to sleep. I've seen teenagers from small villages in Kenya write beautiful speeches about climate change, in English. It reminds me every day that language is more than words. It's connection. It's opportunity. It's freedom. Personally, it's also made me more open-minded. I've eaten things I never thought I would, grill dance in Colombia, dance salsa even though I have 2 left feet, and had deep conversations with people I wouldn't have met if I had stayed in England my whole life.
James, your experiences have been incredible. Is there a particular story, a special moment you've had as a teacher that you'll never forget?
Oh, there are so many stories, but one that truly stayed with me happened in Guatemala, actually. I was working with a small NGO teaching English to young people in a rural area. These kids had never seen a foreigner before, and I was the first English teacher they ever had. There was one boy, his name was Lewis. He was 14, incredibly shy, and he had to walk 2 hours every day just to get to school. At first, he wouldn't speak a word in class. He'd just sit there quietly, eyes wide, trying to understand. One day, we did a little role-play activity. The students had to pretend they were at a restaurant, ordering food in English. When it was Lewis's turn, he stood up and said, "I would like chicken, please." Everyone clapped and laughed, not at him, but because we were so proud. That one sentence changed everything. From that day on, he spoke every class. By the end of the year, he was helping other students with their pronunciation. He even started dreaming of becoming a tour guide to show foreigners his beautiful country. Last I heard, he was applying for a scholarship in the capital city. All because of a single sentence, "I would like chicken, please."
Wow, James, that gave me goosebumps. It's incredible how something as simple as a sentence in English can transform someone's future.
Exactly. We never know what kind of doors a language will open. But not all moments are emotional, some are just plain funny. Like the time in Chile when I asked a student, "What did you do yesterday?" and he said proudly, "I killed my mother." Of course, everyone gasped, until I realized he meant I called my mother. The pronunciation got a bit dangerous. Smiling face with open mouth and smiling eyes. We all laughed so hard that day, and I used it as a lesson about pronunciation and how important context is.
That's hilarious. English mistakes can be terrifying and funny at the same time. But those are the stories we remember, and they help us learn, right?
Exactly. Those little mistakes are part of the adventure. And they're usually the best memories. And if I may share one more. In Peru, I had a student named Mariana, a single mom who cleaned houses during the day and came to English class at night. She told me she was learning English because she wanted to apply for a job in a hotel in Cusco, one that required basic conversation skills. She studied so hard. She recorded herself, watched videos, repeated phrases again and again. After 6 months, she got the job. And now she's not just working in tourism, she's teaching basic English to her co-workers. She told me, "English gave me power. It gave me confidence. That's why I love this job."
That's so touching, James. Honestly, you've just reminded me why I do what I do. Teaching English is about helping people open doors. And you've opened so many. Before we finish, what message would you like to give to our listeners who are still at the beginning of their English journey?
If you're listening to this, you've already taken the first step. You care. That's huge. My message is, don't stop. Even when it's hard, even when you feel stuck, keep going. Learn one new word a day. Practice speaking even if no one's listening. Talk to yourself, your pet, your mirror. Make English part of your life, not just a school subject. And remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be brave. Every mistake you make is a step closer to fluency. And every time you say something in English, no matter how small, you're building a better future for yourself. So keep learning, keep dreaming, and never give up.
Beautiful. Thank you, James, for being with us today. Your stories, your wisdom, and your heart have truly made this episode special. And to our listeners, don't forget to like this episode, leave us a comment with your favorite part, and tell us where you're listening from. We'd love to know where our English community is growing globe showing Europe Africa. See you in the next episode of IA English Podcast. Bye-bye.